Hey guys, it's Mike Monty, one half of Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. And we want to reach out to all the fans out there who have supported our show to say thank you. Thank you for making 2021 one of our best years. And one of our best years was because of Anchor. Anchor, the way that you can have your voice heard. You can be just like us. Record your own podcast. Use the Anchor tools to edit your podcast. Use it on a phone. Use it on your computer. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all with Anchor, they're totally free. So be just like Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh. We're looking together for a great 2022. We've got huge guests coming on board. Oh, yeah. You probably wonder why Jimmy's not here right now. Well, he's prepping for one of the best interviews we're about to have, and we're going to surprise someone with. So hang aboard with us, and don't forget, be like us and use Anchor.
Good evening and welcome to Wrestling Rewind. I am your host, Angel Amoroso, and I am joined by my co-host,
Iron Man Tommy Cairo.
The Iron Man Tommy Cairo. And this week we are back again for episode 2 of our book reading of Master of the Ring. And let's get right back into this, Tommy, because this was a great story last week. Yep. We want to get right into part 2 so we can.
Yep, this book is available. You people, should start reading. And very interesting, well written, good documentation. There's a couple shots of him on the back cover. Very interesting man. And we join him right now, just in Southern California.
Talking about the original Nature Boy.
So that's the path to capital. I don't think, seriously, they misguided me because this is not the path to capital. This is way before. I don't know why that's the ultimate goal. All right, here we go. Affable Vincent James McMahon, a 45-year-old product of New York, was credited with being the stabilizing force in the northeastern region after years of mismanagement. His action-packed television show from Washington, D.C. revitalized the box office and thrilled long-suffering fans. Off camera, he stylishly maneuvered between the larger-than-life personalities involved in the New York promotional scheme and was usually a few steps ahead of his opposition. In truth, the entire territory was balanced by grudges and grievances, and since there was a ripe history of double crosses, nearly everyone was paranoid. McMahon avoided the pitfalls of his predecessors and let those around him get caught up in the maddening shenanigans. He followed his vision, and by 1960, he had 3 functional TV outlets serving 14 states from Ohio to Maine. Wow. In addition to his beginning of carving out his territory, in addition to his television programs in Washington and Pittsburgh, he launched a flavorful live weekly show from the City Arena in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Despite McMahon's success, the New York market remained extremely fragile, and the influence of Jack Pfeffer and Pedro Martinez in 1959-1960 only complicated matters. But things were about to take a negative turn for the head of Capital Wrestling, starting with the announcement of a $300,000 lawsuit brought on by the family of a recently deceased promoter. The widow and son of the late Edward Contos, the longtime operator in Baltimore, filed a suit in Washington, D.C. District Court on February 26, 1960, charging McMahon and Toots Mond with antitrust violations. The complaint was one thing, but it had a broader implications relating to the 1956 consent decree signed by the members of the National Wrestling Alliance, who collectively voted not to restrain trade in the field of pro wrestling. McMahon didn't sign the decree, but Toots did, and he was on the hook for prosecution. A federal investigation determined he acted with malicious intent. So that stuff was starting right there.
Right. So that's where the NWA WWF feud really started with a lot of the legalities of who was run where and who was doing what. So in our opinion here, WWF was in the wrong.
Yeah, it started out a little bit crooked. You know what I mean?
Right.
Once the foundation is set and it's crooked, that building's never going to be straight. So, yeah. So it said Capitol Wrestling was rocked by the news. It soon became apparent that officials from the Department of Justice, way back then, were looking into the situation and assessing the credibility of the claims. As that issue was hanging over McMahon's head, he executed one of the shrewdest moves to date. He brought Nature Boy Buddy Rogers back to the territory. But to backtrack a little bit, the first conversation about a possible return to New York actually occurred months earlier in Ohio between Rogers and his close pal, Bobby Davis. Bobby Davis was a manager, wore a suit, sharp, really sharp, like a sharkskin suit he wore and stuff. He was a very good mind for the business. Davis has spent a good chunk of 57 and 58 in the Northeast and not only solidified himself as a heat magnet, but had effectively networked with industry leaders in the area. They loved his work. He was a quick-thinking, fast-talking operator and fit right in with the New York crowd. Toots was especially taken by Bobby's abilities, and they formed a solid friendship. When Davis left in December of 1958, the door was open for the reemergence sometime down the line. So they figured they'd probably work together again. Things were good. Maybe timing wasn't right. Rogers and Davis got into a discussion, and Buddy expressed his desire to wrestle in the East again. He wanted to be closer to his mother in Camden and explained his problems with Mond and was convinced that it was impossible. Impossible. Brimming with confidence, Davis called Toots and spoke about Buddy's recent success in Ohio. When he mentioned the possibility of future appearances in the New York region, and Mont instinctively recoiled. After digesting the information and considering the potential, Toots asked Davis an important question. He wanted to know if Bobby could handle Rogers. That meant in the event did the tour Northeast, and could Davis's temper Buddy's natural appetite for power behind the scenes. He liked to get his guys in, get them over. Naturally, Rogers wouldn't have the same leeway that he had with Al Heft, and he would have to conform to an entirely new system. Toots recognized the economic opportunities and told Davis, if you can control him, bring him in. So now he's coming in with the sharp guy with a suit and stuff. Classy,
Right.
Money was the key word for both Rogers and Mont. Trust between the two men was already fractured, but if anything could mend fences, it was a sleepy diet of hard cash. Steady diet, hard cash. With Davis in Buddy's ear and McMahon keeping the overall peace, there was little room for selfish manipulations. Personally, Rogers had extra incentive to make the jump to Capitol. For the first time in his career, he was being properly sponsored as a serious prospective candidate for the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight title. So he had just a gimmick title at this point. Beginning with Davis and continuing with McMahon and Mond, Buddy had consensus support behind him from day one, and it was gratifying. In a way, it was an acknowledgement of his importance in pro wrestling and recognition of his astonishing success. But campaigning as the for the NWA title was an arduous political task and not something that happened overnight. Rogers had to be patient. In the meantime, Capitol had come up with an ingenious plan to push Buddy right straight to the top. First, he had to make his local debut as a full-time employee. That came on April 4th, 1960 at the Capitol Arena in Washington, D.C. Buddy wanted to make his initial appearance special, so he brought his handicapped opponent Buddy Rosen, with him from Ohio. Rosen, a high school track star from Philadelphia, was one of his proteges, and they were acutely familiar with each other's style in the ring. With precision, Rogers called the match and gave Rosen most of the offense. In fact, Rosen looked to be the better grappler and was on his way to getting a pin. At the last second, Rogers turned the tables and achieved victory. On the road that night, Davis asked the Nature Boy why he went to such great lengths to prop up Rosen's mat ability, and Buddy wisely replied, "You're only as tough as the guy you beat." Interestingly, Buddy's match was placed mid-card underneath a tag team bout featuring the Bastion brothers in a handicapped, prominently starring 24-year-old strongman Bruno Sammartino. So
there you go.
This hadn't happened yet, so we're before it. 6 days later, Rogers outclassed Arnold Skaaland, who was working during a broadcast from Bridgeport, further establishing him on Capitol TV. This match was different than his bout with Rosen, and all of his strengths were on display. He was obviously a heel, utilizing debilitating kicks and punches, and proceeded to injure Skaaland's leg in a short time. From there, he wrapped up the match with his patented figure four grapevine and celebrated on the way out with his manager Davis by his side. Like Rosen, Sweet Daddy Siki had migrated. Remember him, Sweet Daddy Siki? Black dude, like Hawaiian or something.
Yeah.
Migrated to the Northeast for bookings and appeared on the same Bridgeport show. Two other names on the program were significant, not so much to the active storylines or the draw, but for the personal history of Buddy Rogers. Jack Vansky partnered with Tony Altamori, who was Lutez's tag team partner when they were the Sicilians. Like Rosen, Street Daddy Siki had migrated to the Northeast for bookings. The other names were personal history of Jack Vansky, Tony Altamori, and this guy working under the hood. His name is Jim Austieri, the Zebra Kid. I'll never forget seeing a picture of him, the zebra mask. It's like, so, like, who's that guy?
Okay.
Incredibly, 18 years later, in 1942, Vansky and Austieri were Buddy Rogers' opponents in the second and third known pro matches. So he was good at, like, helping people along. Like, you allow somebody to look better than you, and you're the one that made that happen. Everybody's too selfish to do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's big, especially.
I realized Rose was from Philadelphia, and for him to take a guy who was pretty much unknown at the time and put him over like that is something that a lot of people should listen to and learn from. In sportsmanship.
Yeah, and that's why the old squash matches were no good, because you can't use that guy in the future for anything, that you let him get beat down all the time. And who did the star or the heel beat? Who did he beat? If he beat a guy that could barely, looks like he would be walking the streets with a bottle of wine, then it's not impressive. But if some new kid comes in and he's built and he takes the offense at the beginning, he's knocking the shit out, bumping a guy all over the place, then it's something, So people never work long enough to get to the point where they feel like they don't have to be the recipient anymore. I could be, the person that gives. So,
you're only as good as your opponent.
And if you looked at him, you might have thought he was a little bit, but actually he liked to help people.
Playboy Buddy Rose.
Yeah. The imaginative idea McMahon came up with to bolster Rogers' standing was to give him a noteworthy new championship honor. Prior to his Bridgeport debut, Buddy was billed as the reigning United States Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, a creative distinction with a fantastical lineage. It was later alleged that this title claim was spawned by a 1950 tournament victory over Ruffy Silverstein. No such event ever took place, of course not. But in the fog of wrestling, who was going to complain? Capital touted Buddy as the best wrestler in the country, and by watching Rogers on television, he often looked it. But he was equally controversial, and there seemed to be no limit to his villainous ways. On May 4th, 1960, in Bridgeport, he forced Jack Davis to submit and then surprise attacked the popular Chief Big Heart in the aisle leading to the ring. Fans were outraged as he smashed Big Heart in the head with a chair, opened up a forehead wound. Buddy was satisfied with his actions and left him in a pool of blood. The attack was unprovoked and senseless in the eyes of spectators, and it was just another reason why Rogers was already the most hated wrestler in the region. The basic blueprint of his matches usually went one of two ways. He either dominated from start to finish, or he portrayed the vulnerable champion on the verge of losing. For the latter, it didn't matter who his opponent was because he sold heavily for both newcomers and journeymen. Buddy cowered in the face of defeat, and the people loved it. They wanted to see him pinned. However, Rogers was far too crafty and did whatever it took to win. Many times when he was on the verge of losing, he casually draped his leg across the bottom rope to save himself, causing the audience to moan in unison. His timing was perfect. Rogers could cheat, trick, and swindle his way to a victory in those situations and stagger from the ring cowardly, and he won as many matches by brawling or scientific means, leading to the figure four submission finisher. It's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, the original of hardcore. Some of, the earliest times of guys.
And I'm quite sure if you checked his influences, you would be able to pick up on how and why he does certain things, and then you innovate. If you're good enough, you innovate yourself. But essentially, that's what Dynamite Kid was. He was a total amalgamation of every possible style that anybody was wrestling professionally anywhere in the world, and put it all together and made new stuff out of it. And, that's when you can do that. And this is the same thing. It's not doing the move, but it's doing the move. And he knows what to do to incite people, to get them excited. You don't have to do much, small amount. The more you do, the more you got to do.
Well, less is more.
Yeah.
I get it. All these things mean something. And all these expressions are disappearing from society, and they really shouldn't, because they would really tell you a lot if you listen to them.
Yeah, and again, TV is a tight shot, right? The theater is a further shot. So the actors have to reach out to the fans, and that's what these old guys used to do. That's what they did. They point at the guy in the corner, point at you, and then do the shit can like maneuver, like you're throwing them out, and then go like this. And everybody saw it, and you knew exactly what he meant when he did it. You didn't even say, well, what does he mean?
Part of it.
He drew them in because he's far from them.
Right.
So the gestures have to be, big. So Johnny Berend, he was another all-timer. Buddy's feud with Berend lasted several months, and their bouts were high energy from beginning to end. Their death match. Death match. Back
then. What year was this now? A death match? This is amazing.
Yeah, early. It's not even 1960. It's 59.
Okay. So unbelievable.
Death match. They skipped right over to hardcore and extreme,
right,
and went right to the death match.
Yeah, they were all right out the door. A death match. Awesome. Go on.
I saw an ad for a cage match, but evidently the promotion didn't have much money because they had chicken wire around the ropes. But I remember the image in black and white of the guy bleeding behind the chicken wire, and I was like, it was just so powerful. Wow. Bruno's picture done in a reverse, like I want to do Dynamite Kid, like it's a negative of him bleeding, is on a cover of a magazine called, what was it, an old magazine for men, Argosy, Argosy. Bruno on the cover, and this, you see the picture, as a kid, I don't know what it was about the blood. I don't know. And it was like just so mysterious, you know.
Yeah.
I remember first seeing the images when he had 11, 12 books, magazines came out every month. And like 8 of them had people bleeding on them. Yeah, that's the ones you wanted.
Yeah, pretty hardcore. Beyond hardcore then.
And way back then.
So let's get into this death match. Let's hear about this.
Death match, October 31st in Cincinnati, sold out the Music Hall, 4,200 tickets. And Rogers gained an important win in their saga. On January 2nd, 1960, Rogers regained his Eastern Championship from Handsome Johnny in Columbus, winning in 2 out of 3 falls. During the last 4 months of 1959, Rogers made regular trips to Montreal and was just as successful there as he was in Ohio. He used his figure 4 grapevine to beat Killer Kowalski and captured a Montreal version of the World Heavyweight title on September 16th. 2 weeks later, he dismantled fan favorite Edouard Carpentier. You remember him? He was a French guy that was real acrobatic for back then.
Okay.
Yeah. Johnny winning in 2 out of 3 falls, Killer Kowalski. So he beat a lot. He got wins over a lot. And Jersey Joe Walcott, the night special referee who was a boxer, after the contest. Actually, it wasn't much of a scrap, but a lopsided pummeling with the ex-boxing champion giving out the punishment. So, there was no shoot boxer wrestler.
Right.
Never, there's never been a report that I've ever heard of a pro wrestler getting into an altercation outside of the ring, on a row, wherever, with every sports type from A to Z and not coming out on top. Never. You'd hear it because they can't wait to tell you that. But it doesn't happen.
Well, because wrestlers know how to do more than just punch. Punch and kicks.
And the biggest thing
in consideration when someone knows how to take you down and put you in a hold or a move, it's going to be a lot more effective than your punches and kicks.
You can't breathe.
How to do that. So.
You can't breathe when your carotid artery is being blocked.
Right, exactly. So wrapping up with this edition of our book reading, what do we got wrapping us up here?
Well, I'm going to try to hit all the high notes on the way to the confrontation and the split for Capital that became WWE, and Vince McMahon Sr. and the Bruno Rogers thing, and it was just a matter of both guys can draw in 2 different places, so go your separate ways, and you both got a belt. Bruno, he wanted to claim he's the WWF champion. So, that's when things really changed. So that's an important part. But I thought we would go through some of the key guys that he hung with. And he was respected and given big wins, and they knew he could back it up, So, anyway.
Great stuff. And, I love these book readings because they really give you an opportunity to get a lot of information and a lot of
look in.
You wouldn't hear.
Yeah.
Unless it was coming from this. And a lot of people, they don't go out and buy books and everything. And you have hundreds of books. May I say hundreds?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
listen, I don't see any, dude, I'll never, ever. When I found out about Crowbar Press, and when he first started, the first thing I think we ever bought was Mick Foley's, was like the first book to really start the flow of all the books coming out. And then I stopped buying anything that was like, as soon as you get to the WWE or not the old WWF, I'll listen. As soon as you get into the late 80s, I won't watch it. I won't listen to it. So that's the way I judge what I watch by a time frame. It's not interesting.
Era, which is a lot more interesting than some of the more current eras of books. But you have them all, and sooner or later we'll get to every single one of them. And so this book again for everyone was called.
This is Master of the Ring, Camden, New Jersey born, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, innovator. And you have to think about this.
Innovator of the death match. We've learned so much about this. Not only the innovator of hardcore, it seems, a lot of blood, lots of fan interaction, making people wild with his but also the innovator of the death match.
And think about this. He didn't have a script, or he was probably just saying, I think I know enough because I can make the people do whatever I want them to do. So let me just take my own lead. And this probably wasn't him listening to too many people because he was already like established. And what's this guy, old guy with a cigar, going to tell me? I'm in there. I know when I push the button, the people respond. So you were left to maybe be your own creator and have your own storyline that you create, Well,
I think that there's so many nature boys that have followed this one. Yeah. And we really need to get back on this book and cover a few more chapters to maybe get a few more stories in. And we will get back to that in the next book reading here on Wrestling Rewind. Join us every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. on Monty and the Pharaohs Network on YouTube, where we're there with Wrestling Rewind, having book readings and wrestling archives and just teaching you pro wrestling from A to Z. So if you want to get your wrestling lesson, tune in every Sunday at 7 for myself, Angel Amoroso, and my partner, the Iron Man, Tommy Cairo.
Have a good night, everybody. We got the books. You don't have to buy them. You just got to tune in.
Have a nice night and a nice life. Good night.